A history of trauma can give you a high tolerance for emotional pain. Just because you can take it doesn't mean you have to. By Dr. Thema. Suffering is not a superpower. By I Smash Fizzle. Hey everybody, welcome to the 51st episode of the Toy Talks podcast. My name is Toy Washington. And of course it's Tuesday, so it's a new episode of the Toy Talks podcast. You heard correctly. Last week was the 50th episode, and it was only just now when I was recording, I just looked back and I was like, this is episode 51. Like, that is amazing. Consistently a new episode every Tuesday since the 1st of January 2020, and I definitely feel very blessed to call this my 51st episode, 50 straight episodes of consistency and content, and I'm really, really proud. I actually rewarded myself by purchasing a new mic. So let me know how you find it. I find that the sound is really, really crisp. I think it was crisp before, but this just adds some je ne sais quoi to the song. It's called Hiding in Your Trauma, and we are going to be discussing trauma. We're going to be discussing how we deal with trauma in the workplace and exploring where some of that trauma comes from and how we work through trauma. Also as well, I told you guys last week that there is a program I believe that we all should be watching, especially if you're a Toy Talks listener, an avid listener. And it's a program that is now on BBC iPlayer called Industry. And all the episodes are up now. So I think last week we got to episode, I believe, 3. I think it goes to up episode either 6 or 8. I'm not too sure. But all the episodes are out. And I really want you guys to watch it, because I have a really, really special episode next week. And I will be reviewing Industry. It deals with a group of young people who are working in the financial industry, recent graduates, and they're all basically, quote unquote, competing for a perm role. And it's the journey they take, the development of the characters, how they navigate work, and how they navigate the objective to obtain permanent employment there. And it deals with a lot of trauma. There's a lot of themes, grooming. There is abandonment as a theme. There is a lot of sexual themes. It's sexually explicit. I do have to say that as well. It deals with rejection, humiliation, bullying, trauma. There are a lot of themes that are dealt with in that series. So I definitely would recommend it, as I have done in the last podcast episode. This episode, I've tried to avoid it, if you want me to be honest, because I think whenever we talk about trauma, we have to go to a place where we're not comfortable. And often we either deal with our trauma or we bury it. And I think as Black women, we're not taught to express emotion. And then we go into the world of work and we're stripped of any human emotion. We're seen as strong, and struggle and strength always appear in the same sentence. And it's something that I do not promote, I don't encourage. And to be quite honest, I'm sick and tired. My shoulders are heavy, my shoulders are tired, my back is aching from having to be strong all the time. What is strength actually? Oh, if I don't cry, then I'm strong? That's bullshit. It's almost as though if we get upset, it's not understood, but our white counterparts can express emotion any way they want to. The white fragility of the white woman is protected. But yet as Black women, we're not allowed to break. And then what happens is we really do break, because we are so committed to burying our emotions that when there is no more space to bury that emotion, it comes out, and it comes out in a way that cannot be controlled. When I think about trauma and the world of work, if you experience trauma in the home, if you are not taught conflict resolution in the home, if you are not learning how to relate to different characters in the home, if fundamentally your structure of the home is traumatic, then you go into the world of work where there is supposed to be structure. You carry that trauma into the workplace. And I think people underestimate how your background affects and manifests itself in the workplace, but it does. And if you're not taught conflict resolution, can you imagine going into the world of work, dealing with different characters and having to understand and navigate and manage different characters in order to survive the world of work? And what you find is if you're never taught conflict resolution, you go into the workplace and you experience conflict and you do not know how to resolve it. So we're taking some of that home trauma into the office. And you get into the office and it's a whole different ballgame. Because it is like a jungle whereby they say the strongest survive. It's not even about strength for some of us. It's just about surviving. I'm just trying to pay my bills. I remember earlier on in the podcast, so season 1, I spoke about the humiliation that I experienced. Obviously at the time not knowing that I was dyslexic, but not being able to spell the word birthday and being humiliated in primary school and actually wetting my pants out of pure fear of getting the spelling wrong, out of fear that I'd be humiliated, and I got the spelling wrong and I was humiliated. So in school, the authority were the teachers, right? And at home, I had a really good upbringing. I can't criticize it, but I would definitely say that as I started adulting, the relationship with my mum became really difficult. In fact, people don't talk about that. It's like a taboo, isn't it? To talk about the difficult relationships between mother and daughter. You know, you mention it and it's like, okay, well, what's wrong with you as the daughter? Like, what have you done? Because it's almost kind of promoted and fantasized that the mothers and daughters are supposed to be really close. You know, you put in a movie and you see those things depicted in such fantasy, and the reality is actually really different for a lot of us. And then you go into the world of work, and again, the authorities are, and I say authority, quote unquote, are your managers, senior managers, line managers. And for me personally, I definitely struggled with female authority because my female authority at home had completely broken down. So I didn't understand conflict resolution from that perspective. That was really hard. And then the humiliation and trauma from primary school, and that's just an example, just one example of trauma from my education, where humiliation seemed to be like a common theme of my education when it came to teachers, like people in authority. And then you go into the workplace, and again, anything that remotely looks like humiliation is really triggering for me. And I remember in a particular workplace that I worked at, and I hadn't been there for long, and I was relatively fresh out of kind of education. And when I say fresh, like, I mean, God, I can't even remember how old I was, early 20s, I'd say. And I was working in a particular place, and I wasn't happy. The manager was always shouting at me. If I made a mistake or there was a spelling error, it was humiliation in the middle of the office. And one day I just couldn't take it no more. And I resigned, and I just said, I can't work here anymore. And she says to me, do you think you're going to get better than here? Do you think you're better than here? And I was so terrified to just walk out, because I thought, right, if I walk out, I'm not going to get a good reference. Because at that time, I was very ignorant to references and, and also back then, it wasn't a standard reference. People were giving references and kind of being personal about those references. So I was petrified by a system that told me that I had to literally take the abuse just for a reference, just so someone can say she's worth it, like she's good to work with. Do you know the level of humiliation a lot of us have had to take just to get a good reference? It's not like how it is now, where you just get a standard reference. I took that. I took on my last day. She basically frog marched me out of the office. I was so young, and I just kept thinking, my only crime is resigning. And then you take that trauma and you don't get a chance to work through it, or how that made you feel, explore that emotion. And I remember at that time just feeling a bit worthless. I remember another occasion, somewhere I was working, and I was earning good money. And I was just so grateful to have this job. It was one of the first jobs I had after coming off job seekers allowance. So for me, the fear was, I never want to be in a situation where I have to go back to the job centre. I know that I had quite a traumatic experience. I felt quite ashamed. I remember when somebody I had grown up with around the area had saw me in the job centre, and he just pointed at me in shock. Oh, it was horrible. Anyway, I found this particular job really hard because I kind of felt like nothing I could do would ever be good enough for the boss. And I would really try so hard. I'd second guess myself. And one day she had asked me to come in for a one-to-one meeting. Now, I'd been there 3 months. She'd never asked me for one. So I just kind of felt like, well, we're nearing the end of my probation. So maybe this is just kind of like crossing the T's and dotting the I's. And long story short, she had my CV in front of her. And she had red marked it with red pen. I've always been taught that red pen's really rude. She red penned it. She said to me, Toya, I've been reading over your work and things. I can see that you're struggling. I didn't hire somebody to train them. I expect you to hit the ground running. So to be honest, I'm not really happy with some of the work that you've been doing, and I'm having a look at your CV. I'm even wondering if you actually have a law degree. Are you sure that you have this level of education that you've written here? Because I'm not seeing that. Oh my God. I felt this lump at the back of my throat, and I was trying so hard to not allow my gaze to break, because I felt like if my gaze breaks, my lips would turn downwards and I would just cry uncontrollably. But I knew in that moment I had to fight through. I didn't feel like I could show any form of weakness, because I felt like if I did, not only that wouldn't save me, but this woman is committed to breaking me. Because you know how personal it is to take somebody's CV and red mark it and be writing notes all over it, having been 3 months in the role. Everything's been fine. And this person's basically questioning your ability. And I said to her, I was like, I'm so sorry. Please, anything you want me to do, I'm quite happy to do it. What can I do to improve? And you should have seen the look on her face. She almost looked like she was enjoying the power. I was broken, because I was trying so hard, and I realised that anything that I would submit to her, anything I'd ask for approval, would never be good enough. And it was almost like I was a burden. Like she just needed to fill a role. And maybe, maybe I wasn't up to the standard that she needed me to be, but she wouldn't even tell me what I needed to do to improve. And after the meeting, she said, as I picked up my bag, she says, Toya, I'm really happy that you didn't argue back. Because if you did, I think I would have had to terminate this contract. But since you're willing to work on it to be better, I'm willing to extend your probation. And I turned to her and I said, thank you so much. I left the room and went straight into the toilets, and I cried like a child. I was terrified. It had taken me close to 6 months to get a job. Suddenly I got a job. I'm 3 months in and I'm basically being threatened with unemployment again. I can't go back to the job centre. That's trauma. That's bullying. That is actual bullying. If she was really that concerned, if she really wanted to extend my probation, there's ways of doing it. She didn't even have the HR form to extend nothing. I remember that Easter was the worst Easter I've ever had. My heart was beating. I would wake up in the morning, think about work, and I would feel physically sick. I managed to get to a point where I couldn't take it anymore. Because I can't work like that. I can't work feeling like I'm being watched. My every move is being watched. Terrified to send an email. Terrified to respond to an email. I couldn't live like that. I ended up resigning. And when I say resigning, I had a job interview and was waiting for feedback. But I couldn't stay there anymore. Because either she was going to sack me and I would be made unemployed, or I would have to leave and be made unemployed. Either way, I knew that it wasn't going to end right. I managed to get another job. And to this day, when I look back, I'm so grateful. But when I look back, I just think to myself, that is a level of trauma. That level of bullying, feeling like being threatened, basically. But the person not actually telling you what you can do to effectively save your job. But that person instead enjoying the power and wielding that power and that will over you. I couldn't even keep my leg from shaking. I was terrified of being unemployed. When I cried in that toilet, it was fear. I felt alone. I felt that it wasn't like I was working in a team. There was only 3 of us. I was the only black girl. I just didn't know what to do. I had no one to turn to, no one to talk to. And when I look back, I do feel really upset because I don't think I ever worked through that trauma of how that made me feel. And that was humiliation. I felt humiliated. She humiliated me. She basically red-penned my CV and basically questioned my ability and my credibility. What about the time where I was working somewhere and I sent an email to the wrong person and my manager found out? And when he found out, he came. It was an open office. I'll never forget this day. And he said, stand up. In the middle of the office. Stand up. You sent an email to the wrong person and you've made me look bad. So now I'm going to make you look bad. And you'll never make that mistake again. And everybody was looking at me and there were all these eyes staring at me. And for the life of me, I didn't know what email he was talking about. But I was ignorant. I didn't know what my rights were. I didn't know that he couldn't get away with that. I was just grateful to have a job. How would I explain to my family as to the reason why I didn't have this job anymore? Those were the things that would go through my mind anytime I experienced humiliation. And it would trigger me. And it would remind me in primary school where I was humiliated. That's trauma. I could give you a number of examples of trauma. And I'll be honest with you, I think doing the podcast has been really cathartic because it's enabled me to kind of work through some of the things I went through in the world of work by discussing them, being honest about them, and also advising how I could have dealt with it better. But I understand that to get to this point where I am in my life and in my career, it's because I've had those experiences. But it doesn't mean everybody has to have those experiences. You know, there is a saying that I really can't stand, and it's a saying that says, you grow through what you go through. Yeah, that's true to an extent. But why must your growth have to come from pain and struggle? Why must that be the definition of what growth looks like? Why does trauma have to be so intrinsically intertwined in a black woman's experience of the world of work? Why is that so important to measure against achievement by the amount of struggle that you have had to overcome? That shouldn't be a prerequisite for success. Struggle, pain, humiliation and trauma shouldn't have to be a prerequisite for success. Why is it that all our stories are similar? Of crying yourself into a frenzy in the toilet. How many of us have felt that knot in our stomach of just not wanting to go to this workplace? The feeling of complete dread. I felt that. I made myself a promise. If ever I feel like that, dread, I will have to walk away. Because my mental health means more to me than anything else. Because without my mental health, I don't have anything. My mental health is all I have. And I'm not going to compromise it for anybody. I definitely think in the workplace, I would say definitely in my 20s, I was always looking for approval. And I think part of that comes from being raised in an African household whereby I had an amazing relationship with my father, not so much with my mother, but I always wanted her approval and I never got it. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, I just never got it. So I definitely can see the correlation then in the workplace where I would look for approval. And that would come from almost, definitely I would say, kind of being like the office pet or like the favourite. My ambition was to be the favourite because if I am the favourite, I get approval. If I get approval, I get to keep my job. And that is a very toxic way. Or it's a very toxic, well, I wouldn't say it's a toxic way to look at it. In an environment that is toxic, that could be quite detrimental. Because if you're then rejected or not seen as the office pet, how do you cope? So without kind of spoiling next week's episode, industry, iPlayer, BBC One. Oh, so it's BBC Two, I think it's on. But it's on a BBC iPlayer. There's a girl called Yasmin. And Yasmin is a white girl, privilege, money. And her way, her choice of navigating to obtain a permanent role was to be the office salad and tea and coffee girl. Nobody put her in that position. She chose it. And she thought if she gets the teas and coffees, they're going to like her. She really went over and beyond, but all it brought was humiliation and disrespect. And when I would watch the show and I'd watch Yasmin go and get the teas and the coffees, go out of her way, just doing the most, it made me uncomfortable to watch. Because all she wanted was that approval, that nod that she was, not necessarily that she would be kept on, but she's doing a good job. Because ultimately, she lacked self-esteem. She didn't believe that she had what it took. So the only way that she could have what it takes is to be subservient, to be the servant of the team. I've done that. And that comes from a place of trauma. It comes from a place of not feeling like you're good enough. It comes from a place of comparison. And I think parents don't really understand how detrimental it is to compare your children, but to do it in such a way where your child always comes worse off, irrespective of how hard your child works, irrespective of how much your child tries to get your acknowledgement. Comparison is the thief of joy. And enjoying a situation, going through the motions and appreciating a journey, you're comparing yourself to somebody else, irrespective of what that person's background is, because you just don't feel like you're good enough. But then my question is always, how do you work through your trauma? Do you even acknowledge that some of the behaviour that you display in the workplace has come from a place of trauma? Have you ever actually considered that that's a possibility? Why does this person make me feel so uneasy? Why is it that this situation, why is it that I find myself in this situation all the time, every workplace I go to? Have you ever asked yourself those questions? And it's not from a position of blame. Trauma is real, especially if you've ever faced humiliation, bullying, racism, any form of discrimination in a workplace. Because the power, as we see it, when we're in those situations, is with the employer. And you know something? I need you to understand that the Toy Talks platform seeks to readjust and realign that power so that you realise your power as an employee. You realise your power as an individual, as a person. You realise your leverage, because we're made to think that as employees we have none. Of course you do. Whether you're a fixed term contract, perm contract, contractor, you have some form of leverage. But the only way you'll realise that leverage is if you know what you are worth. Self-worth. Self-worth. Self-worth and self-love come from the same place. When you learn to love yourself, you place worth on who you are. But the workplace and the way it's constructed, it can break you. And I want you to understand, just because you have been broken doesn't mean you stay broken. I've been so broken that I've been terrified to get to another job, for fear that history will repeat itself, or you believe that you are the problem, when sometimes, and most times, it is the organisation. There are toxic organisations, and you have to be able to discern and understand that if you are part of a toxic environment, a toxic organisation, you have to devise a plan to get what you need from that organisation and bounce. Because longevity is not found in toxic organisations. Consistency isn't found there. Pain, upset, chaos and trauma, that's what is in organisations that are toxic. So you have to be able to discern and understand, okay, I'm staying here for this amount of time, this is what I need to get out of it, and I need to go. I always tell people, I always tell my friends that it's really important to take breaks in between roles. And what I mean by that is, if you know you're leaving somewhere and you've got somewhere to go, maybe you've interviewed, you've got a job offer, you need to have at least a week or two in between. And I don't even for a second think that's enough time. Not for a second. But you need to have couple of weeks in between. Because you need, have you ever had this thing where if you're leaving one job to go to another, maybe you've got a week or two in between where you're working your notice, and in between working your notice and the start date of your new role, and you get really ill. Have you ever had that before? That is literally, for me, I found my body basically shutting down because my brain has been running laps. God knows what I've been through in that organisation. you need to give yourself time, and you need to understand that working through your trauma often happens when you're in other roles. Do you know what I mean? So you could go from job A to B, and you're working through your trauma in job B that you experienced in job A. And it's horrible. You know, I don't for 1 minute take for granted access to therapy and psychologists, because I've not always been in a financial position to be able to afford that. And where I have been grateful to be in that position to afford it, believe me, I realise that the things that I experienced in the workplace, the trauma didn't start at the workplace. Sometimes the trauma starts from your home. Sometimes the trauma starts in learning institutions. Or just, you know, kids in school. Kids are nasty. Being bullied by children in school, and then you go into the adult world of work and you think, no, there's no bullies here. This is work. This is adult business. And you're finding adults acting like kids, and often workplaces feeling like the school playground or a learning institution where adults who are supposed to be responsible are bullying people just for the sake of it. Sometimes it is literally either to get ahead just for the sake of it, or because they feel they can. And then we internalize all that trauma. And then they call us angry. Well, fuck me. Sorry if I'm a little bit angry. I've been bullied for the last how many months in this particular role. I've been treated like shit. You know, in the last episode where I talk about David, and I told you guys that, he was let go of last week. When I was doing the treatment for this episode, I had to think about, what is it about David that really unnerved me? I had to go to a place. Remember how I started this? It's not easy to talk about trauma. I had to go to a place. I had to ask myself, what is it? What is it that he represents that put me in a position where I nipped it in the bud real quick? Because the Toya that is navigating work now and the Toya that was navigating work way back when, completely different people. Completely. I navigate the world of work like a map at the back of my hand. But it's taken a lot for me to get there. David represented to me what it's like to work in an organisation where people are constantly backstabbing just to get ahead, and they'll stab you right in the back and they'll trample all over you just to get there. So when he accused me of launching into him, he threatened my peace. It was a direct threat to my peace. And I remember examples where people threatened my peace and I failed to act. And then my work environment became hostile and uncomfortable because I was too afraid to stand up for myself. I was too afraid to have a backbone because I didn't want to lose my job. So I'll be damned if 30-something Toya is going to go through that as a well-versed and experienced woman who has navigated work. He was a threat to my peace. And when I put my foot down, I knew that he would be his own undoing. I didn't have to do anything. But I had to let him know that he needs to know I am not the one. But it takes so much energy to have to basically tell someone, fuck off. I don't want to play this game. Don't try and bully me. This is not what I'm here for. I'm not trying to flip and take over. I don't want to be part of your little coup to take over power. But there are some people who are so thirsty for power in the world of work that they will do anything. And they're quite happy to bully and push people around, talk to people like they're a piece of shit. Even where I'm working now, I emailed one of the stakeholders and I introduced myself and said if I could be included in a lot of the emails regarding a particular matter because I'll be managing this matter going forward. Really polite email, right? And it went a little bit like this. Hi Mike, my name is Toya. I'm a contract consultant here. and I'll be working on the so-and-so project. I know that you are dealing with it from a certain perspective. I won't say what. And I would, when you are liaising with XYZ on this particular matter, please can you CC me so that I have visibility and I'm able to assist in the matter as it progresses. And Mike replied, I'll try. Thanks, Mike. Passive aggressive, right? In my younger years, I'd be so intimidated by that. Oh, I just don't want any trouble. I don't want any trouble. I don't want any trouble. You do realise when you're like, I don't want any trouble. I don't want any trouble. Usually the trouble comes in it. But it's different when you know that is trouble. Like, that's passive aggressive. I'll try. What the fuck does I'll try mean? I'll try means I acknowledge your email, but I don't really fucking have to do anything, and I'm not playing ball with you, and I'm actually going to make your job difficult for you, and I will try as good as you're going to get as a response. It's just fucking rude. But that type of person, I know how to deal with them. That reply ended up in my burn folder. Do you think that I've created the burn folder because I'm bored or something? I created the burn folder because I've been burnt so many times in the world of work, because I've tried to be nice, I've tried to be liked, I've bent over backwards, and people have just opened their bum holes and just shat all over me. I'm like, no. I before others. When it comes to the world of work, it's I before others, because I've got so much trauma that I've had to work through. I realise that at the end of it, it's just me and my trauma. So if it's just going to be me and my trauma, I'm going to commit to spend time in making sure that I create a healthy, safe space for me to work in. So if it means I've got to create a burn folder, just to let you know that I'm no dickhead, just in case I have to use it. Because when these people are moving mad, they don't remember when they do it. So when you bring the evidence now, they start stuttering in shock. Half the time when these people move mad, they don't even credit us with any type of intelligence. They underestimate us, and they don't actually think that we'll do anything. And I'm happy for them to lure themselves into a false insecurity. But if I've learned from anything in terms of the historical work-related trauma that I have faced, is that you need to be your own best ally. You have to understand that sometimes it's not even about you, Sometimes it is just the racist structures that are built. The racist workplace that work within a structure that benefits the privileged. And all the rest of us deal with the crumbs. Well, I'm going to tell you now, I'm making them crumbs into a full loaf of bread. Please. Your burn folders are so important. Even when you think it's not, it is. And I'm not going to sit here and say, this is what you do and your trauma will go away. There's so many residual effects of work-related trauma that sometimes you go into an organisation and you become triggered. But it's about understanding what those levers are, what those triggers are. Understanding that, unfortunately, the work is like a Ferris wheel. You just keep going. Some people don't have the luxury to take 6 months off in between roles. You just have to keep going. Try and, if you can, get therapy, have conversations with a therapist to talk through your experiences. I've now created the Toy Talks podcast to aid, assist you and support you as you navigate the world of work. There is a lot more awareness, I think, about mental health and the world of work. And I definitely think that we need to spend time talking about our experiences. I want you to understand as well that just because you've had trauma in the home doesn't mean you deserve or should experience trauma in the workplace. But I definitely can see some of the correlations between certain flaws in our upbringings that then plays a role in the workplace, especially if we haven't had the opportunity or the insight or the understanding to recognize what that trauma looks like. And often we recognize that trauma when we're triggered rather than when the trauma is living in us. Does that make sense? You guys may have realized that, especially in my early 20s, I had a lot of jobs. Babes. I've worked in a lot of places. And when I look back and I think about it, I think it was because I was dealing with a lot of trauma in certain workplaces. So I had commitment issues. I never wanted to be tied down to a particular workplace. So it would be rare that I'd stay somewhere for like a year. Nah. I'll be jumping one place or another. And on my CV, like how I'd explain it away is either I wouldn't put certain jobs on there on my CV and I'll just say, oh, study leave. Or study break. Or I would say, oh, it was through an agency. And then even though they would get a direct reference from that particular organisation, they would say, why did I leave? And they'd say, oh, I resigned. I'd be like, yeah, I resigned because it's an agency job. So it was at the end of the contract. I'd just blag my way. Like, I just don't, it wasn't like how it is now, like with roles where people really like hone in on and really ask the difficult questions. And back then it was easier to get jobs than it is now, I would say, especially at that level, like I was very much entry level during that time. So I could go, and sometimes the jobs were agency as well, but other times they weren't. And I couldn't hold down a job. And it was like a running joke with my friends that I'm living life like a rock star, when really it wasn't, you know. I was just dealing with a lot of trauma, like residual trauma from workplaces, working in places where people are just shouting in your face, humiliation, feeling stupid, being told that, you know, we wouldn't give you more than photocopying in case you got that wrong. Or people labelling you names, you know, we talk about labelling in the last episode. And that kind of like sticking, like mud sticking. All of that is trauma. Especially when you felt like you're not in a position to defend yourself, or that you're not in any type of position of strength. So you become subservient to that treatment. It's abuse. It's abusive. In nature, it's bullying. It's abusive in nature. And I couldn't. And I don't know what the switch was for me where I realised, actually, do you know what? I can do this. And all I can say is the fear of having no money, the fear of returning to a job centre were very high on my avoidance radar. So it meant that it got to a point where I realised that the only way I was ever gonna avoid finding myself in those positions is if I held down a job for a long period of time. And as I was acquiring these experiences, I'm learning about the world of work. I'm learning. I'm just learning it in a very traumatic way because I'm having to have all these bad experiences to be able to learn. And when I think about, you know, my 20s, it's like the pathfinder roles, finding my path, trying to figure out who I am. So for me, it was like I'm gaining all this experience. So now I'm in my 30s and I look back and I think to myself, wow, like I've really experienced a lot. And God's so kind, I'm able to sit here and tell people what those experiences are, what I learned, how I could have avoided it, how better to manage certain situations. I'm just so grateful to be in a position to be able to do that. But I think it's equally as important to open up dialogue about trauma and work-based trauma and what that looks like for people, because it looks different for different people. And I want you guys to understand that you shouldn't feel the shame of feeling broken by a workplace, because I'm not going to sit here and say, well, if it breaks you, it makes you strong. I'm not saying that. It doesn't actually make you stronger. It makes you very, very hurt. It makes you very, very fragile. But what I will say is no condition is permanent. And as soon as you recognize that something is triggering or that there is a traumatic event that has happened, especially in the world of work, that is you committing to work through what that trauma is. And that is you committing to finding a way to navigate the world of work. And if you're listening to this podcast, that is you making a choice to understand the strategic element of navigating the world of work. I am in a position now where I can see things coming a mile off. I know how to protect myself. And if I could go back in time, I wish that there was something that could have educated me so that I didn't have to go through a lot of the things I did. But then if I didn't, I wouldn't be here right now, would I? I wouldn't have the podcast, I wouldn't have the platform. So we give thanks. We give thanks. God, that's a lot. It's deep, innit? It's deep, because even as I'm talking, I'm remembering traumatic events that happened in the world of work. But it was really important that I talk about it, because it's easy to become invisible in organisations as a strategy to protect yourself. But equally, it's easy to also feel invisible in places where you want to be visible, but people are deliberately choosing to ignore you or choosing to pretend that you don't exist. But I want you to know that your existence is not dependent on other people. Your existence is dependent on the choices that you make, how you wish to navigate the world of work, how you are going to participate and navigate the world of work so that you can light up the path of your success. And if you allow the racist white structures that have been created to oppress and suppress us, if you allow that to take a hold of you, that means you're choosing to allow them to win. And whilst you have a voice, and whilst you are able to make the choice to succeed, to reach your full potential, then there is hope that you are then able to work through that trauma. And I believe in you. I know you can. I'm not going to press too much on the whole Priti Patel. I think we all know kind of where I stand on the whole Priti Patel situation. My only concern is for those people who were her victims, who were the victim of her bullying. And the fact that the Prime Minister knows, it's been confirmed in the investigation, that Priti Patel broke behaviour ministerial code. And she's now received a formal written warning when the consequence should be that she resigns. That's what they say. That was the recommendation. But Boris Johnson has chosen to allow her to continue her tenure as Home Secretary. If that's the example of what happens when somebody bullies members of staff, that they're allowed to keep their job and they're given a bit of a telling off and a written warning, is it any wonder the things that we see in organisations that we work at? I'm going to leave that one there. Listen, we have had a couple of dilemmas, and I definitely want to read them out to you. But before I do, there was this one dilemma, and I wanted to share it with you. It's really, really, really important. I did. So the young lady, she reached out to me. She says, Toya, I'm really excited. I've got an interview as a legal contract assistant, and I'm so excited because I really want to be a contract manager. And I know you're a contract manager, contract consultant. So is there any advice that you can give me as I embark on this interview and hopefully become down the line a contract manager? So I replied to her and I said, well, you know, you need to have some form of formal education in terms of, even if it's like the IACCM, or, you know, I'm not telling people to go and take a law degree, but you need to have, I said there needs to be a commitment to a passion to do with contracts, because you have to love it, you know. And I would say that, you know, with this role, try and see if you can get onto some courses. You don't have to do a law degree. You could do other forms of contract management education to be able to fully have a well-rounded view about contract management and hopefully go into those roles as you gain experience. And she wrote back to me. She says, Toya, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to my, legal contract assistant interview, but I do have a passion for contracts. I have a law degree. That's what she wrote to me. She goes, I have a law degree. I have a master's in law as well. And she goes, I think she says she's bilingual, so she speaks French or something. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I said to her, why are you applying for a contract admin role if that is your background? She says, well, because I've never worked in as a contract manager before, so I'm trying to, get in entry level. And I said, no. Experience will come. Yeah? I said to her, Donald Trump didn't have the credentials or he wasn't waiting to acquire anything before he applied for the role of President of the United States of America. If Donald Trump is going to be anything, let that be an example to you, that you don't wait so that you're super qualified before you apply for a role. Sometimes you take a leap of faith and you apply for that role, knowing full well that you have the passion and you have the ability to learn. I said you need to apply for contract management roles. I don't actually think you should be applying for legal contract admin roles, with the greatest respect. And she really received the advice that I gave her. And it really made me realize that it's almost like we're conditioned to think that we have to start from the bottom. And I don't agree with that. I don't. Like, why do we wait until we qualify 1,000% before we go for certain roles? Like, why do we think that that's our prerequisite? But we're watching our white counterparts just tap dance and salsa into and moonwalk into roles that they're not qualified for. It's because they're told that they have access to that privilege. They've been raised, our white counterparts have been raised with privilege. So that privilege comes with confidence. Whether they're qualified or whether they're not qualified, they will go for that top job. They will learn there on the job. But us, no. We want to start all the way from the bottom, because that bottom looks like suffering. So if we've done the suffering, then we'll feel like we have earned the right. No, we need to change our mindset. That's trauma there. That's trauma. That is the trauma of society telling us that we're nothing. So we should start at nothing. And I don't agree with that. So I hope that that young lady has taken what I've said in, and understanding that nobody sat me down and taught me how to be a contract manager. I had a passion for contracts. Yes, I had my legal qualifications. But ultimately, when I went in as a junior contract manager, I wasn't there for long. I got the skills I needed. You're looking at somebody who was born and raised in Tottenham. Not the lottery funded Tottenham that you see now. I was born in a ghetto. I was from the hood, eh? You're looking at somebody who's worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Goldman Sachs, Capita, Inmarsat Global, to name but a few organizations. Yes, I didn't go there and tell them, oh, when I was in university, I was a cleaner, I let them know I'm like you. Yeah. Yes, I went to law school. Some of those people that you're sitting in front of, they've never even seen school building past SATs. Yes. So don't wait to be qualified for the role. Don't have to wait to be qualified. Sometimes take a leap of faith. It requires you to take a risk and trust in yourself. You need to have that energy of I deserve. I deserve, my dear. You need to have that type of energy. And that comes from a confidence from within, to believe that you truly see yourself where you are supposed to be. So I hope that helps somebody out there as well to understand that success is, I'm not saying success is easy to attain, but you have to also see yourself as successful. You don't have to be part of suffering to qualify for success. After all, Donald Trump, he's still sitting in that White House telling everybody that he's not going anywhere. He's leaving on his own terms. But the fact of the matter is, he didn't have the credentials to even be a president. We are talking about a sitting president that is now a squatter. Yes, that's the vim, that's the energy you need. So another dilemma I received was from a young lady, and it reads, "Hi Toya, hope all is well. I just want to start off by saying you're amazing and I love listening to you. I've been out of work since March and been applying for a lot of things, but the job market isn't that great, or somehow I don't fit the criteria that has affected my mental health quite a bit, as I just really want to get back on my feet. I feel like I'm doing what I can and I should trust in God's timing. I just wanted to know what your view on this is and how you would tackle this issue." So when I received this message from this young lady, I said to her that I would discuss this on the podcast. But remembering also that two beautiful black queens, one purchased 2 masterclasses and another one purchased 1 masterclass to be gifted to anybody who finds himself in a difficult position and therefore not able to buy masterclass. So at that point, I said to her, I'm going to discuss this on a podcast, but I would like to gift you a masterclass bought by a black queen for me to gift to somebody. She was so grateful. She said, Toya, I'm close to tears. I says, no problem. Send me your email address. Myself or my PA will get back to you. We'll give you a gift voucher. That was given to this young lady today. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. As I've spoken in previous podcast episodes, I've spoken about the commercial space. It's difficult, especially where you have like Topshop, for instance. That's almost, I can't remember how many thousands of jobs are at risk of redundancy. It's a difficult time to be looking for a job. If you've got a job, be grateful. Be grateful. What I'm saying is be grateful of God's mercy that you have a job, because I know the situation that people are in. But just because you're grateful for that job doesn't mean you should be suffering, no. Because there are jobs out there. With this young lady, what I am going to say is it is difficult, and it is mentally often quite draining, and it is often as well you feel quite dejected, especially when you get like job rejections. Something that I will say is I've gifted you the masterclass bought by one of our black queens, and I will say that whatever masterclass you listen to, one that I would recommend is the CV masterclass, because the introduction to you is your CV. So I feel like there is this energy I get anyway when I update my CV. It's like getting a new hairstyle, and then you want to be outside so everybody can see it. It's the same like a CV. You know, when you refresh your CV and give it the vim that it deserves, and then you start cascading it, applying for roles, you get this, you get this confidence. And I think that it's often quite hard to kind of, come back from feeling quite down, especially when all you want to do is work so that you can make some money to pay bills, or maybe that you're signing on. And I know that signing on money ain't shit. I know that. I've suffered for that signing on money. So I think the first thing we need to do is confidence and building your confidence. And I feel like part of that will be through updating your CV. I will also say it's important to understand like what industry you're in and what the industry looks like what does the market look like. There are jobs out there. People are still recruiting, because organizations have had to figure out a workaround, which has meant that they can't stop working. We talk about God's timing, but it also comes from kind of how you feel within and what you're projecting. It can be very demoralizing and disheartening to be out of work for a long time, especially it makes you feel like, okay, what is it that I have to do to, like, what is it about me that I can't? You start, having these negative thoughts. But I hope the first step is the CV masterclass. I hope the second step is really truly understanding what the market is saying, and talking to agencies, applying for jobs via agencies as well. The agencies have a lot of roles at the moment. The market is starting to pick up. I think also as well, something that I did is I just never stopped applying. I just didn't stop. And sometimes I would take break, maybe in the weekend, but for the most part, I never stopped. And believing that no condition is permanent. And I did say that to this young lady. No condition is permanent at all. And I don't want you to think, oh, March, it's been such a long time. We've been in a pandemic. Ordinarily, would you find yourself out of work if it wasn't a pandemic? Probably not. Or probably, even if you're out of work, not for the length of time that you are in. So I think it's important that you don't blame yourself. But you will find something. I believe that you will. And I believe that the market will pick up. I want you to stay in contact. If you ever need to speak to somebody, reach out, because it does compromise and play with your mental health a lot. It does, because it's that constant feeling of rejection, and then it makes you not even want to try to apply. So I want to encourage you. So like I said, I've given you access to any masterclass of your choice, and anything that I can do to help you, please let me know. And I want to use the podcast to encourage you, because I know that this is going to turn around. And when it does, I'd like you to keep us updated, because I know that a lot of people that I give a dilemma advice to, they always ask, oh, where are they now? And it's always nice to hear. But yeah, hopefully that gives you some comfort and some encouragement. Hopefully you will find something going to keep you in my prayers. But more importantly, don't put too much pressure on yourself. If you do your best and you try your best is always good enough, because the best is all you've got. The next dilemma. Hi Toya, I hope you're doing well. Congratulations on your recent engagement and all your successes. It's great to see you flourishing on your life's journey and taking the time to invest it back into us. My dilemma isn't so dramatic, but it would be great to get your advice. I've been in my current role for 18 months, and it has truly been a blessing. I came out of a redundancy payout which had God's divine hand all over it, and it carried me into this role. Here, I have been able to build on the skills I knew I had, but I wasn't confident enough to communicate and execute. But I have now found my voice. Lesson learned from my last role. I have also learnt the value of a healthy working environment. I have now found my stride in my current role, and with it, I know, with proof, that I have brought a significant amount of value to the company across departments and internationally. But I'm also told by my colleagues, including my seniors. With this in mind, I'm thinking to ask for a raise. However, I have never successfully done this within a role before. My only pay rises in the past have come from negotiating at the start of new jobs. I am confident I have a case, but I'm unsure about how to approach this. I would like between 7 to 10k, but know if this is too large a jump for a raise without a position change. Do you have any advice for me on how best to approach the salary raise whilst in my current role? For more context, I have my end of year, I think this is your financial year, annual year review in April, which comes with an annual company-wide bonus if targets are met. It's also a month before my 2-year work anniversary. I've also been approached by recruiters suggesting positions in more senior roles, 20 to 30k above my current salary. From research, I believe my role caps at 7 to 10k to my current salary. And also, I started my job here. I negotiated up based on other positions I had been considered for that were 10k plus the salary they first offered. I negotiated on 5k. I hope this is all clear. Many thanks. Well, first of all, can we just please give you your flowers? Do you know, I really respect people who really believe in their vim. And that's not to say if you don't, I don't. That's not what I'm saying. I respect the courage it takes, especially when we're almost shamed out of not celebrating or not talking about money and our wins. So the fact that you're able to tell me, Toya, I did this, I really respect it, because it's not a given that everybody is like that. Secondly, I'm going to say to you, I have a negotiation masterclass on the toyatalks.com website. So all my industry knowledge about negotiation, whether you're in a role, whether you've just been offered a role, I've put it all in the masterclass. I've poured my heart and soul into the negotiation masterclass that's on the toyatalks.com website. So when you're asking me for any advice on how best to approach a salary raise whilst in a current role, I would direct you to that masterclass, because honestly, I spent a lot of time talking about the theory of negotiation. So where you've done the research in your industry, where recruiters are approaching you, that's all leverage. In my masterclass, on the negotiation masterclass, I talk about how to use that leverage. Not to use it as a weapon, but to use it to your advantage. How to frame conversations about salary raises, especially when you're in a role. I talk about it in the negotiation masterclass. So that's an easy response for me to this dilemma. And also as well, you know what you deserve. In the negotiation masterclass, I talk about a walk away point as well. I talk about all types of things. And when I say walk away point, I'm not necessarily saying walk away from the job, but actually opening up your mind to the possibility that you could get more elsewhere, and how then that would affect a current negotiation if you're forced to look outside. So my lovely, I'm very proud of you. I'm very proud of you for finding your stride. I'm really proud of you for finding your voice, using it, reaching your potential in this workplace, and understanding that you're worth a lot more. So the next step now is your salary negotiation. Irrespective if there's a company-wide bonus or whatever, I definitely believe just because it's a company-wide bonus, it doesn't preclude me from opening up a conversation about salary raises, especially when I'm in a job. No. Those are two different conversations. So please, if you want to understand how I would advise and how I would approach a salary negotiation whilst in a current role, or if you're being offered a current role, please go onto the website www.toyatalks.com. The masterclass is the negotiation masterclass. So before I draw this episode to a close, I really just want to end on this. One of my biggest fears in any organization, whether I'm a consultant, whether I'm a contractor, whether I'm a perm, fixed, whatever, micromanagement. If a manager has to micromanage, it means a manager doesn't know how to manage. Because being able to be an effective manager is knowing how to empower your staff to deliver. Because when they deliver, they make you look good. There are a lot of managers that are currently very uncomfortable with the current situation we're in now, where we're remote working, because they can't remote micromanage. In order to micromanage, you need to wield your will of power and tyranny face to face. You can't micromanage remotely. It doesn't work. And these micromanagers think they're doing job. They're not on job. I'm going to say micromanagement is a form of aggression. That's what I'm going to say. Because it is. It's a form of aggression. Micromanagement speaks to the lack of effectiveness of a manager to be able to manage. I'm going to also say that I recognize that some people have trauma from people who have been micromanaging them before or currently micromanaging them. I'm also going to say, please burn folder. You then have to find the courage. Because in this type of condition of a pandemic, plus the frustration of having to navigate work in a pandemic with the added pressure of micromanagers, it's not beans. But I'm going to devote a podcast episode to micromanagers because I think it's important. And how to actually deal with micromanagers. But the reason why I wanted to mention it here is because we're talking about hiding in our trauma. And I would like us to be visible. And the only way we're going to be visible is to have safe conversations and create safe spaces to have those conversations. And I consider the Toya Talks podcast as a safe space. Micromanagement is a form of aggression. And we'll pick that up again in another episode. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. A lot of people reach out to me about programs I'm watching, and I wanted to quickly add some of the programs I'm watching at the moment. And you know what? For me, it's like I like to relax. I like to watch programs where I don't have to use my brain to figure things out. So I'm currently watching Ready to Love, which is on the OWN network. Put a Ring on It, which is on the OWN network. There is a program, it's a series, it's called For Life, and it's written by 50 Cent. I really enjoy that. The Family Chantel on TVC, I really am enjoying that. It's amazing. Obviously, I've just finished watching Industry on BBC iPlayer, which please can you go and watch it, because next week's episode is solely going to be based on that series. And as for podcasts, the two podcasts I'm listening to at the moment, what I love anyway, Say Your Mind, unofficially known as Suck Your Mum by Kelechi Okafor. I love her podcast, it's amazing. Currently listening to Under Construction by Tamar Braxton. I'm a Tamar fan. Well, I don't know if I am anymore, but I'm listening to her podcast at the moment. Yeah, it's okay. It's kind of not my go-to, but I'm willing to give it a chance. So those are the shows and the podcasts I'm listening to at the moment. So I wanted to share that with you guys, because I get asked that all the time, actually. So also as well, you guys know that in December I'm going to take a bit of a break. I have been pre-recording some episodes. I've got some special episodes coming up this December, and I'm really excited for you to hear those episodes, just because I'm going to have some special guests. Yes, I'm going to announce it. I'm going to have some special guests. You guys know I've been carrying this podcast, just me, myself, and I. But there's some really special people who are going to be joining me for a couple of topics. So make sure you listen in, as you always do, to Toy Talks podcast, especially in the month of December. Yes, I'm really excited for that. Also as well, I'm going to do an episode in December called Ask Toya, where you guys get to ask me anything you want. I'd prefer it to be work related, but I'm open, anything you want. And it's just how I'm going to draw the year to a close. I thought it would be a nice little spin on the episodes that we do here. So if you've got any questions you want to ask me, then email hello@toyatalks.com, and in the subject box, put Ask Toya. If you have a dilemma, please email hello@toyatalks.com, and in the subject box, write dilemma. All dilemmas are anonymous, all questions are anonymous as well. And I think that's it, guys. Like, I'm looking in my notes and I think that's it. Yes, honey, we've come to an end. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this episode. It has been a difficult episode. It's an emotional episode, isn't it? But, you know, sometimes we have to deep dive into these emotions that we spend so much time hiding and burying. Sometimes we have to create the safe spaces in order for us to have difficult conversation. Hiding in your trauma. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you would like to follow me on social media, my personal Instagram page is Toya_Washington. The Toya Talks Instagram page is Toya_Talks. Follow me on Snapchat, Toya Washington, all one word, or of course Twitter, Toya_W. If you have a dilemma, as you know, it's hello@toyatalks.com. Thank you so much for listening. I would ask that if there is somebody you know that will benefit from the Toy Talks podcast, please share it with them. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review the podcast. I read all your comments and I see all your ratings. I want to thank you all for allowing the Toy Talks podcast to be able to chart on Apple Podcasts. We charted again last week, I think top 40. And I'm really, really proud. And it wouldn't be possible without you guys. So we'll meet here again next week, Tuesday, for another episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Toy Talks podcast. My name is Toya Washington, and you have been listening to the Toy Talks podcast.